Good afternoon, everyone. Taking the educational live sessions further, today we are going to discuss about IVF pregnancy and what do we actually mean in layman terms about IVF and what is the journey all about and what all diagnostic tests are actually available for you to increase the success rate of the IVF procedure. Yeah. So IVF, if we break down this term, IVF means in vitro and fertilization. In vitro means outside the body. So fertilization means occurs when actually there is meeting of the female egg, ovum, and the male sperm. So just to show you a brief biology, yeah. So on the screen you can see this is the uterus, the fallopian tube and the ovary. So the ovary produces eggs and this is the female egg. So the male sperm comes and meets in the fallopian tube ampulla and then there's further development till the zygote and the further embryonal stages occur. And this is the endometrial cavity or the uterine tissue where there is actually implantation by the blastocyst and then this pregnancy actually goes further. So what we actually do is we actually take out the in vitro step actually occurs from here or the hair. The fertilization part occurs outside the body and then the embryo is sent so that it gets implanted towards the uterine cavity. So sorry for the interruption. Again, I can just show you this program. This is the actually image, normal biology image, where we can see this is the uterus, this is the endometrial cavity, and here we can see this is the ovary and the fallopian tube. So the egg is produced by the ovary, and the fertilization of the female egg and the sperm occurs in the ampulla, and then the embryo further develops. And during the day 5 or the day 7, the blastocyst that is developed implants in the endometrial cavity and here the pregnancy develops. So what we are actually doing is we are fertilizing it outside the body and then we transfer the embryo so that it gets implanted inside the uterine cavity and then the process actually goes further like a normal pregnancy. So, what are the indications for IVF pregnancy? Who can actually are suitable candidates for IVF? Women who are having blocked or damaged fallopian tubes can undergo IVF. Actually, women having endometriosis condition can also undergo IVF. By endometriosis, what we mean is there is presence of endometrial tissue which was actually inside the uterine cavity, outside the uterine cavity, and then there occurs the hemorrhage and scarring. When this endometriosis is extensive, it can lead to infertility problems. Women who are actually having ovulatory disorders like PCOD or they're having decreased ovarian reserve can also require IVF. And then there is male factor infertility also, where there can be reduced sperm or there can be motility issue or there can be morphological issue or abnormal sperm which can also lead to infertility. There are couples who are having recurrent miscarriages and IVF can assist them, and couples who are actually having genetic disorders or they are carrier of certain disorders. By IVF, we can actually choose healthy embryos and then we can transfer those embryos inside the women and they can go on to have a healthy baby. And there can be certain women who are having advanced age because as the age advances, there is reduction in the ovarian reserve. So even in such cases also IVF can help them achieving the pregnancy. So when we talk about various types of IVF procedure, normally earlier what used to be done was that eggs were collected from the women, and if there was no issue in the male, like there was normal sperm count and motility, etc., they were allowed to fertilize normally. But supposedly, if there is some issue in the male sperm, that is, they are having very reduced count or there is certain motility issue, then we are having certain modifications of IVF procedure. like IVF-ICSI. By IVF-ICSI, I mean IVF intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Here, what we are actually doing is we are injecting the sperm inside the egg so that they fertilize. And then there's also second modification, that is IVF-PIC-C, or the IVF physiological intracytoplasmic sperm injection. By physiological, what we mean, we are using a membrane that is having structure similar to the outside of the eggs. So what happens is that sperms get stick to those membranes, which are actually normal, and then those sperms are being chosen and they are followed up with the ICSI procedure. Then the second is donor exosperm. If there is recurrent IVF failures, or if one of the couple is having certain genetic abnormality, or supposedly certain single mother or father, they want to enjoy the parenthood, so they can also go for donor eggs or sperm. Fourth is surrogacy. So in surrogacy, this is actually indicated for people who are having recurrent implantation failure. By recurrent implantation failure, we mean that during IVF, they are having healthy embryos, but for certain reason, it is not getting implanted in the endometrium. So in such cases, surrogacy is actually advised. Or there can be certain carcinoma of the uterine cavity only, or there can be abnormal uterine structure also. In those cases, surrogacy can be followed. The two not so common techniques are also GIFT, that is gamete intrafallopian transfer, and second is ZIFT, that is zygote intrafallopian tube transfer. These are actually done in very rare cases, or in where there is actually ethical attachment, which actually makes them believe that they want the egg and sperm to meet inside the fallopian tube only, or they want the zygote to actually develop completely inside the human body only. In such cases, these two techniques can be advised. Coming to various IVF cycle and the stages, the first step that is being done is the down regulation. By down regulation, we mean that we reduce the hormone production in the female, so like a menopause stage, so that the ovaries can be further stimulated by giving drugs, and we want the ovaries to produce actually around 12 to 15 of eggs, so that this is, it depends actually upon the age. So when the number of eggs are being produced, it is monitored on the basis of ultrasound investigation, where they see the number of follicles, how are they progressing, what is their size. And based on it, a day is decided for egg collection or the egg pickup. So this is actually done under general anesthesia, where the eggs are being aspirated, and these are being looked by the embryologist under the microscope, and they look for the maturity of the eggs. And during this time also, the uh, uh, male partner gives the fresh sperm, or even a frozen sperm can be used, which is treated. And then the embryologist fuses the eggs and the sperms inside the laboratory only, and then the formed zygote is actually being followed up for following 4 to 5 days, where they actually grade the embryo based on the number of cells and the morphology, how it is there, and the couple is being updated telephonically about their progress, and based on its progress, then the embryo transfer is being planned, that when do they have to transfer the embryo. And for that, medications are being given so that the female so that they can prepare the endometrium for the embryo transfer. So just a brief overview of miscarriage. What are the causes of miscarriage? By miscarriage, we mean there's a spontaneous pregnancy loss which occurs actually before the 20th week of pregnancy. And there can be numerous causes of miscarriage, which can be certain chromosomal abnormality. There can be certain blood coagulation disorders, or autoimmune disorders can be there. There can be certain structural uterine anomalies or endocrine disorders, or there can be certain infections also. So there are various causes that can lead to miscarriage, but it is very important to know why the miscarriages are happening, so that we can manage the case accordingly for the future pregnancy. Now, when I talk about chromosomal abnormality, there can be 4 broad categories where we can divide. Actually, we all are aware that we have total 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs of chromosomes. So, whenever there is an increase or decrease in the genetic content, these leads to either abnormal pregnancy, where the baby will be abnormal afterwards, or there can be pregnancy loss. So few very common conditions are autosomal trisomies or the monosomy X. So in autosomal trisomy, what we have is generally we have 2 copies of each chromosome of autosomes, which are chromosome 1 to 22. So these 2 copies actually become 3 and they lead to autosomal trisomies. Very common syndromes are Down syndrome, as we all are aware, or the trisomy of 13 or trisomy 18. In some cases, the baby will reach till the final stages of the pregnancy and the baby born afterwards will be abnormal, and in many cases the baby will be aborted itself. So by testing we can, and these actually trisomies occur as a random event. These actually in our body, the eggs and the sperms which are actually present, some of them are normal and some of them are actually abnormal. So these are all random events. Random events. The chances of them occurring in the future pregnancy are very minimum. So we can manage the case accordingly. So there's no need to go for aggressive treatment in such cases. So the clinician can decide. There can be cases of polypoides also, which we also call as molar pregnancy, where we have 3 set of complete chromosomes, that is total 69, or 4 set of chromosomes, which can be 96, etc. And in such cases, also it's not necessary that there will be future pregnancies like this only, but there can be certain pregnancies which can be pre-malignant and we can be more aware of them. Monosomy X, also known as Turner syndrome, this is actually 50% of the cases of Turner syndrome undergo spontaneous abortion. And there can be cases of structural and other abnormalities. By structural abnormality, what we mean is parents can be carrier for balanced translocation or inversion. By balance, we mean that there is no loss or gain of any genetic material. What happens is the part of one chromosome goes and fuses into the other chromosome, and the other parts material also comes to the original chromosome. So when in zygote or in the embryo, what we have is one copy comes from the mother, one copy comes from the father. So there are high chances of the pregnancy to have unbalanced translocation or unbalanced genetic material. So these cases actually undergo for recurrent pregnancy loss. So when we come to know of such cases, we can actually help them achieve very normal pregnancy or early pregnancy by choosing the embryos which are not having those translocations. So just a brief overview that what tests or investigations are being done in infertility cases or in IVF failure cases and the recurrent pregnancy loss. So one common thing that is very major and not to be ignored is the clinical history and examination. It's very important for you to give a detailed clinical history as well as physical examination is also being done, because many cases can be catched up by physical examination. There's one condition in the males called as varicocele, where there is abnormal thickening and the dilatation of the testicular vein. And this can easily be catched up by physical examination by the clinician, and this can lead to abnormal sperms. So what is being done is that varicocele is being treated surgically through a very minor procedure, and those cases can have a normal sperm morphology afterwards. So it is very important to tell the clinician everything. So few tests that are being done when we start the workup for infertility are ultrasound, investigation, and the hysterosalpingography. By HSG, what is being done, we see the structure of the uterus and the tubes, whether they are patent or not, or any structure anomalies there or not, because blocked fallopian tube cannot lead to normal pregnancy. Then second is the hormonal profile, where we look for levels of various hormones like estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone, etc. So that we can actually take guidance of what is the cause that is happening in the body that is leading to this infertility. Then viral markers are being done as a normal process, so that we are aware when we are doing these procedures. And the fourth very common test that is being done is for ovarian reserve testing. We need to know what is the ovarian reserve, and that's why we adjust the drugs accordingly. There's one hormone that is anti-Mullerian hormone, or the AMH hormone. It actually gives you the details of the number of eggs that are present. And because though number of follicles are also counted, but it is not important. It is actually seen in many cases where the AMH is not correlating with the follicle count, because these follicles actually are empty. But the true assessment of the ovarian reserve is being done with the ovarian stimulation test, where we give the drugs to the female to know how is the ovary responding and how many eggs are actually it making. The fifth very common test is the semen analysis, and it has to be done to know what is the reason, whether it is the male factor or the female factor. And semen analysis can be done both by automation as well as manual, where we look for the sperm count, its motility, as well as morphology. And sperm DNA fragmentation test is also being done, where we look for the quality of the DNA. If the DNA fragmentation index is high, then those cases can directly go for the ICSI procedure. What if IVF failure occurs, or if you are facing recurrent pregnancy losses? So we need to rule out the causes for the same. The one test that is being done is endometrial biopsy and TB-PCR, because genital tuberculosis is a very common cause in India, which can lead to infertility. And the second is the thrombophilia workup. There are certain conditions where there is coagulation disorders are there, and which leads to the increased capacity of the blood to coagulate, and then all the coagulation factors like protein C, protein S, antithrombin factor, etc., are being tested to look for it. Then third are the certain immunology tests like anti-sperm antibodies, ANA antibodies, because there are various autoimmune disorders which can also lead to infertility. And infection testing is also being done, because chlamydia and gonorrhea have been actually told to be a very major factor for infertility. And some labs also perform the test for NK cell activity, natural killer cell, because it is also being found that these cells also, if they are actually very active, then they can lead to implantation failure. Then certain genetic testing are also there, which can also assist for the same. Uh, One is couple karyotyping. This is the very first time investigation. Second is POC microarray, where the aborted fetus is actually look for its genetic profile. And then there are various pre-implantation genetic testing, where we look to and choose the healthy embryo. And then there is endometrial receptive assay, where we look for the window of implantation, the perfect time where we can transfer the embryo and its chances of implantation are high. And by chromosome microdeletions to know what are the causes for sperm abnormalities. So talking about the importance of various genetic testing, we have couple karyotyping, as I had told earlier also, that this is the very first line of investigation. So the chromosomal abnormality that we were talking, that parents can be balanced carriers for balanced translocation or inversions. Well, karyotyping is the only technique where we can catch up the cases for balanced translocation inversions. So couple karyotyping is very, very important. And if they're having carrier, then also we can help them assist normal pregnancy with the help of various pre-implantation genetic testing. Product of conception of POC microarray is also very important. And then we have various forms of pre-implantation genetic testing like PGT-A, PGT-M, and PGT-SR. So what is PGT-A? This test is actually anybody's screening test. As I've told you that normally 50% of embryos that are formed are abnormal. Though morphologically they will look normal and very healthy, but they can be aneuploid. By aneuploid, I mean there can be increase in the number of chromosomes, or there can be decrease in the number of chromosomes. That is, 2 can become 3 and 2, or 2 can become 1. So these are aneuploid chromosomes. And with the help of PGT, we can help you assess the better implantation rate of such cases, and they can also be taken in the cases for recurrent IVF. So second is the PGTM. PGTM is meant for monogenic disorders or the single gene disorders. So PGTM is actually being done for cases where in family we have a previous child where there can be a certain genetic disorder, which is a single gene disorder. Both the parents and we trace back that both the parents are found to be carrier for the same disorder. So what can be done is that the embryos can be chosen where we can look for the healthy embryo which are not having those genes, or even if they're having, they're not going to cause any form of So for them, PGTM disorder is actually PGTM testing is actually recommended, and then there can be cases where we need to identify the chromosomes which are not having any structural rearrangements. By structural rearrangement, we mean that there can be large sizes of gains or deletions. Then those embryos can also be selected with the help of PGT-SR technique. So just giving a brief overview of few of the techniques, as I have told you that it is very important for us to undergo the genetic testing for the product of conception or the aborted fetus. So the advantages are that for the POC testing, we have two forms of genetic testing which is available, three forms actually. One is karyotyping, one is FISH, and one is microarray. So why are we saying that POC should be tested by microarray? As it is a DNA-based method. By DNA-based method, what I mean is that because the product of conception or POC tissue is very, very unhealthy, and as the number of live cells that are present in the POC tissue are very less, so the chances of having a successful culture by karyotyping is very difficult. And it is very easy to isolate to DNA from even dead cells, so we can proceed with the DNA test. And that small DNA is amplified, which again further increases its sensitivity to a very high level. It offers a high resolution. Now, when I talk about resolution, this image that you can see, this is a karyotyping chromosome image. This is chromosome number 1. So the resolution for it is only 4 to 5 megabase per. So what if I want to see this area only? So it becomes very difficult to see in karyotyping. Certain small micro deletions and micro gains can be there, which needs to be identified. But with the help of this microarray, we can see that just a very small 1 MB deletion also can be picked up. And in this deletion, we have almost 70 probes, which increases its sensitivity further. So the three techniques which I was talking about, this is a karyotyping image. We can see 46 sets of chromosomes. They are being arranged serially, and we see for major abnormality, which whether we can look into it or not. And it also depends on the banding, also how much MB am I able to pick. And this is a FISH technique. FISH is fluorescent based. So in FISH, what we are doing is we are putting probes for specific chromosome which are considered as very common cause for aneuploidy, which are 13, 18, 21, X and Y. Only for these chromosomes we are putting the probes, and these are aneuploidy probe. By aneuploidy probe, I will mean that there can be cases of trisomy or monosomy that can be picked up. Microdeletion cases and such cannot be picked up. And this is the microarray image where we are looking for the whole genome analysis is being done in one go, and we can capture microdeletions also. It offers a faster turnaround time as compared to karyotyping, and it is also recommended by ACOG for prenatal and various POC testing samples. Now, a brief overview about pre-implantation genetic testing. How is it done actually? So, as was discussed further, we allow the embryo to develop inside the lab till day 5, and on day 3 to day 5, embryologist can plan a biopsy where the embryologist is going to take the few cells from the trophoblastic layer, etc. And those cells are then further sent to the lab for testing. Those small cells, DNA is extracted from those very small cells, and then they are amplified further, and the sequencing is being done so that we can at least report aneuploidy change in those of chromosomes. So this is a case of for trisomy 12 as well as trisomy 15. And we can also look for various monogenic disorders also, and we can decide which embryo is better to get implanted or not. So what happens when the procedure is being done, how to know whether the implantation has occurred or not. But after the procedure, after the 12th day of embryo transfer, beta HCG levels are being checked in the blood, and they should be above the normal levels to confirm, yes, that the implantation has occurred. So beyond that, all the investigations that are being done are actually like normal pregnancy only. There are going to be ultrasound investigations where the early scan is being done around 6 to 8 weeks to look for cardiac activity and the status of the pregnancy. Various fetal anomaly scans are being done, level 1 and level 2. Level 1 is done around 11 to 14 weeks, and level 2 is being done around 20 weeks, where we look for the presence of anti-thickness and nasal bone, and major chromosomal abnormality that is present. Growth scan is done around 30th week or something to monitor the growth of the baby. And all the routine investigations that are being done are done here also. CBC, the thyroid profile, viral markers, sugar testing for gestational diabetes mellitus, urine routine, TORCH profile test, and the STD profile test. A prenatal genetic screening test is still being done even afterwards, where what we do are the marker studies and the NIPS screening technique. So by marker studies, what we mean is that certain hormone levels are actually being tested in the blood at different stages of the pregnancy, and then the levels are being correlated with the various USG and the biophysical and the lifestyle factors, and the statistical risk is being given, where we can term the pregnancy as a low risk or high risk for major chromosomes, which are trisomy 21, 13, and 18, as well as the anterior defects. And another genetic screening test is the non-invasive prenatal screening test. It is a fetal DNA based screening test where we are actually looking after the fetal DNA, and then we are testing for the trisomy 21, 13, and 18, and to confirm the findings from marker studies also. So talking about NIPS, as told earlier also, it is based on the selfie fetal DNA. So how does this selfie fetal DNA arise? The selfie fetal DNA actually arises from the cell death of the cytotrophoblastic cells of the placenta. So any placental disorder or mosaicism is going to affect the result also. This test recently has been given ACOG guidelines to that these NIPS testing is meant to screen for every pregnancy. And although earlier indications were also that if there is a high risk or borderline risk for any marker study, or if there was advanced age or certain abnormal GSG features were there, or if there is a family history of having a child born with Down syndrome, and we want to confirm whether this pregnancy is healthy or not, NIPS testing can be done for the same. So the technique that we follow is massive parallel shotgun sequencing. By massive parallel shotgun sequencing, what we mean is that selfie DNA is separated out from the maternal blood or the maternal plasma. This selfie DNA consists of 95% mother and 5% fetal DNA. The selfie fetal DNA are short base pair segments of 200 base pair size. These are being amplified and then they are sequenced and aligned to actually know to which chromosome it belongs. And then it is being counted. Normally there should be four copies actually. Two will be from the mother and two will be from the fetus. If these copies increase or decrease, that means the aneuploidy for the same condition is there. So the disorders that we are covering with the NIPT are trisomy 21 of the Down syndrome, trisomy 18 and 13. Along with that, we are also testing for genome-wide aneuploidy detection ranging from chromosome 1 to 22, as well as sex chromosome aneuploidy. Now, sex chromosome and aneuploidy, especially Klinefelter syndrome, is very important because there is going to be no signs, ultrasound signs, or no other marker tests or etc. is available which can actually detect the sex chromosome aneuploidy syndromes. So just talking about the Down syndrome because it has a very high incidence, when we compare it with all the techniques, NIPT is found to have a higher detection rate, which is more than 99%. So the advantage of non-invasive technique is that we can avoid the invasive procedure if the test comes out to be normal and there are no abnormal features as such also. So it is found to have a sensitivity as well as specificity similar to the invasive tests which are CBS and amniocentesis. Because the major disadvantage of the invasive technique is that it can lead to miscarriage. 0.2% cases are being reported to miscarriage when amniocentesis is being done, and 1 to 2% for CBS, though even if it is being done with expert hands. So when we talk about the in terms of sensitivity, specificity, positive predictive value, and negative predictive value, we find that for trisomy 21, the sensitivity and specificity are very high. When we move to other chromosomes, it decreases because it depends on the GC content of the chromosomes also. But the major thing to note is the negative predictive value is more than 99.9%. By more than 99.9%, we mean that This is the probability of the child not having the disorder when we say that this syndrome is not present in the child. So this is one of the article where ACOG has recommended NIPT for all the pregnancies regardless of the risk. So when we summarize the advantages of NIPS screening is that it is safe, as we have told earlier also. It has higher accuracy as compared to other techniques. It is simple because simple maternal blood draw can give us various answers which we want. And it can be done in twins, surrogacy and egg donors. Now these cases are very common in IVF pregnancy and NIPS testing can be done in them. And it gives a peace of mind test because parents are very anxious when they have lost one of their child because of these syndromes or they have suffered a miscarriage. They can perform NIPS testing in such cases to so that they can have certain peace of mind. Now, who can have the test? Anybody can have the test, but the gestational age should be more than 10 weeks. And the fetal fraction we come to know after we have run the test and we have analyzed the sample. And it should be more than 3.5% for us to report or give it any result or give it any risk. And it can be done in singleton or twin pregnancy, though interprets it, this test cannot be done. So, who are the unsuitable candidates for NIPS? If the mother is having suffering from cancer or is having certain autoimmune disorders, then these candidates are not suitable for NIPS testing because the circulating DNA for two fetal DNA is going to be less in such cases. There can be certain blood transfusion cases also. There can be trisomy or mosaic cases also, or in triplets or vanishing twin. In such cases, NIPS testing is not recommended. So, how do we give the NIPS result? NIPS result is given as low risk, as high risk, or in very small percentage of cases, we are not able to give any call or indeterminate result. These cases are actually borderline risk cases, or low fetal DNA fraction cases, or they can be high data noise cases also. In no call or indeterminate results, it is actually recommended to go for a repeat testing so that we can come to a conclusion or based on the stage of the pregnancy, the clinician can decide whether he wants to go for invasive testing directly or not. So it is a very great technique, but we need to be aware for certain limitations. One of them is no call or indeterminate result in very small percentage of cases. And the second is the disorders that it can screen. It is going to report only the disorders for which the screening has been done. And giving the cases normal doesn't mean that it is going to be normal for every syndrome. So just coming to the end of our session, uh, ending it for certain things to remember for all the couples who are undergoing IVF right now. You need to remember that first of all, you're not alone in this journey. Always talk about your feelings, even if you want to discuss it with the clinician, your friend, or you can maintain a simple journal for it. You need to be positive because it actually impacts your overall profile also. Because increased stress will again increase the stress hormones in the body, and this can actually reduce the IVF success chances also. You need to maintain a healthy lifestyle and always follow the clinician's advice diligently because they know better and share all the clinical details and history. Know beforehand whatever test is being performed, why is it performed, and actually what it is going to report. So it is very important to have all the information and just pamper yourself because it is a very stressful journey that is being followed up. And always remember that now science is really advanced, so it can assist you in so many numerous ways which we cannot even imagine. And last but not the least, always believe in God. From this, at this point, I would like to end the session. Any queries can be addressed to, in this session, or we can contact you afterwards also. Which query?